What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. Today I want to talk about the most likely cut candidates coming up for the New York Jets. They made a couple of cuts this week. Some veteran special teamers, Thomas Morstead out, Greg Zuerlein out. And what I wanted to do was take a look at three players who I think could be next up that are veterans that could be on the move here. First up is probably the most obvious cut candidate, which is Michael Clemens. Like I said, this seems kind of like a no-brainer. The Jets would save $3.4 million against the cap if they decide to cut him. He played 54% of snaps last year, which is obviously just way too high after playing, I think it was 29 and 34% his first 2 years in the league. He did have 4.5 sacks last year, which is more than I think anyone was expecting out of him, but he was not very good against the run, which should be a strength of his. I think he's gotten worse the last 2 years at stopping the run. His best year, I think, was his rookie season, and he just had a couple of not smart penalties last year, like the jumping on the back. Who's that against? Buffalo. And I think the Jets will likely be hoping that Tyler Barron, who they drafted and traded up for in the 5th round, would be his replacement. Barron, a bigger edge rusher. Clemens, kind of that same profile. I would think that Barron, maybe your edge setter, 4th, 5th guy in the rotation. That's what honestly Clemens should be. He essentially started and played over 50% of snaps last year, which is a joke. But the Jets thought that Clemens would be a viable replacement for John Franklin Myers. That was not the case. It was a very clear downgrade and a big reason why the Jets defensive line took a big step back. But I think with the money that you save, almost $3.5 million, that's not a small chunk of change. Guys, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Lofi, the best nicotine pouches on the market. Want to ditch dipping tobacco? Do what I did, switch to Lofi, 100% pure nicotine and always tobacco free. My two favorite flavors, the wintergreen and the mint. I'm working on a mint right now. When I feel a midday slump coming on is when I like to toss one in. So let's level up your nicotine routine with Lofi. Go to lucy.co/O'Leary and use my promo code O'Leary to get 20% off your first order. Lofi has a 30-day refund policy, so if you change your mind, realize it's not for you, don't like it for whatever reason, you can return it. No questions asked. Here comes the fine print. Lofi products are only for adults of legal age, and every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine, and nicotine is an addictive chemical. Next up, I have Allen Lazard, and I know the Jets have issues at wide receiver, but I don't know if it's a lock that Allen Lazard sticks around. Even after he redid his contract, the Jets could just have $3.9 million in dead money and save $676,000. Essentially another bottom of the roster player. He had drop issues a year ago, and the year before that, honestly, we saw what it looked like without Aaron Rodgers. It wasn't very pretty. This regime, in my opinion, I think will prefer Josh Reynolds, who is a similar style of wide receiver. Reynolds acted as a wide receiver 2 in Detroit 2 years ago and played that role pretty well. Last year was weird between the Denver Broncos and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Did not have a very good year. Injuries played a factor. Off the field, he was shot, which was obviously a scary thing for him, but glad that he's okay and back in the league, and the Jets signed him on a cheap deal, and would not surprise me if the Jets use him as their number 2 wide receiver. Not saying that he's going to be number 2 in the pecking order of targets, but I think likely, Garrett Wilson, far and away most targeted receiver. Then I think you mix in Mason Taylor and Breece Hall, and maybe Reynolds is like 4th or 5th highest in targets for receivers for the New York Jets. And again, especially if Lazard goes to Pittsburgh, or if Aaron Rodgers goes to Pittsburgh, then I could absolutely see Lazard following him to play with Aaron Rodgers there. Last one's for me is a little outside the box, but follow along with me. Xavier Newman. So he started 4 games for the Jets in 2023, had the big play against the Giants that year that set up the game-winning field goal. But you look at what they did this offseason. They added Josh Myers for interior offensive line depth. Also, I think UDFA Leander Wygand, who is the international player, could push for a roster spot. Really strong interior offensive lineman. Set a really impressive bench press at the combine. I think a big reason for why they signed him to give him a test run is because of that strength. We'll see if he pushes for a spot, and truly it depends on what the new regime feels about a guy like Max Mitchell, who's played some guard. If they like what Mitchell can give you at guard, then maybe Xavier Newman's kind of the odd man out in this bunch. Some other honorable mentions, you know, I just mentioned Max Mitchell there. I would say he's a fringe guy. Carter Warren, a fringe guy. You know, and that's not, you know, the only one. I think there's, you know, other names here that might not make this roster that Jet fans have kind of grown accustomed to over the last few years. We don't know how this regime feels about some of the older, you know, the last regime's guys. Zaire Barnes at linebacker. Do they feel like he's the next man up, or maybe they like the guy they drafted this year, and some of the, you know, other finds that they've had at the linebacker position. Anyway, let me know what you think down below in the comments on these potential cut candidates. Who do you think is next up on the chopping block? I'm Matt O'Leary. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next time.